Welcome to Piercing the Shroud podcast, a testimonial archive documenting firsthand experiences that challenge the rigid mainstream understanding of reality. Each episode focuses on the raw events of a single experience, when it happened, where it occurred, and what was perceived, step by step, with as much sensory detail as possible. Worldviews, theories, and interpretations are intentionally set aside so the experience can speak for itself. I'm your host, CJ Hazley. Grounded and logical, yet I've had anomalous and mystical experiences that I cannot deny the reality of. From seeing UFOs and advanced technologies to psychic experiences like telepathy, precognition, and psychokinesis and more, I've seen firsthand that reality is much more complex than what we're conditioned to believe, and I'm not the only one. That's why my mission is to build an archive of firsthand testimony for curious minds, experiencers, and future researchers alike. These are real people sharing real experiences that don't fit the mainstream view of what's possible, and their stories deserve to be taken seriously and documented carefully. Welcome to Piercing the Shroud podcast. Let's dive in. How would you classify the experience that you're about to describe?
I would classify it as encountering an inner Earth being, a being from inner Earth.
Okay, so like ET encounter kind of thing?
Yeah, it's an ET encounter, but not extraterrestrial because they're from Earth. So interterrestrial, maybe.
Right on. Okay, and then when did this experience occur?
2018.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Was it day or night?
in the middle of the night.
Okay. About how long did the entire experience last?
10 minutes.
Did time feel normal or distorted?
The reality felt distorted, so time may have been distorted too.
Like sped up, slowed down?
I didn't actually pay attention to the time. That wasn't my focus. I wasn't even paying attention to that.
Okay. And then would you say that this experience was isolated or part of like a series of experiences?
With this particular being, I would say that it was the beginning of a series of experiences,
But nothing prior to it?
not regarding inner earth beings, no.
Okay. All right, now we'll move into where were you physically when this
So I was in my house in St. Louis, Missouri at the time, and in my bed. It happened in my bedroom, and it's where the experience started in my bedroom and ended up in the living area.
And then for the sake of classification purposes, I'm going to ask everyone this question of, were you under the influence of any psychedelics, drugs, or alcohol?
No, no. In fact, I had to work the next morning, and back then I took my job very seriously, and I would never drink on a work night.
And then you were alone? There was no one else?
Yep, just my dog.
And describe the environment. So like the lighting in your room a little bit, and then also what you stepped out into later in it.
Well, it was pitch black. I like to sleep without night lights on or anything like that. So it was in the middle of the night in my room.
And then was this a waking experience or potentially more like a astral projection or fully physical? You feel?
Waking, fully physical. Yeah.
All right, and now we'll move into what, which is just give us every detail you can remember.
Right. So I was in the early days of my awakening. I still had a lot to learn. My mind had been blown by secret space program stuff and alien stuff and Bigfoot and all that, all of the above. And the inner earth, hollow earth testimonies really piqued my interest. They really resonated. I felt like there was something true to it. I had read the Admiral Byrd diary. I was listening to these people who claim to have their own encounters with inner earth beings, Mount Shasta, et cetera, et cetera. And listening to these testimonies, they made it sound kind of easy. If you wanted to communicate with an inner earth being, you could just like get into this meditative state. And one of the tips I remember hearing about at the time was to imagine an etheric cord coming out of your third eye, connecting with the being that you're trying to communicate with. And that's not really I mean, maybe that's what's actually happening whenever you're trying to telepathically communicate, but the whole reason for that practice is to give yourself a visual to make it real. So, and one of the things to, one of the tips for communicating with a higher dimensional being would be you have to be in a high enough frequency so you can kind of meet in the middle, right? Because it's a very dense reality that we're living in. And it's why they don't necessarily show up here
So you were
all
working
the
on all these things prior to this experience?
Yes.
So it was,
So,
kind of, like, initiated by you?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So,
So,
like, kinda like CE5 kinda thing, like human initiated.
absolutely, yes. I
Okay.
was I was actively attempting to communicate with any inner earth being that I could. And I even quit eating meat. I was trying to like raise my vibration, and I stopped eating meat for a year and all this stuff. I was taking like spirituality very seriously, actually too seriously, and we'll get into that later. It's a lesson I had to learn, but I was sitting in meditation every night and I was imagining this whole thing happening where I was just reaching out, like extending out a line of communication to whoever was on the receiving end, whoever could hear it, but not out in space in these inner earth colonies that I had heard about. So I was doing that for about a month and nothing was happening. But I knew something kept telling me to go. I was like, how come everybody else can do this? And I'm reading about these testimonies, listening to these podcasts, like why can't I experience this? So I figured, looking back on it, it was manifestation. Like I made this happen because I had believed in it, and in fact, I knew I could do it, and I never gave up. I proved to myself and probably them that I could do it. And I sat down one night out on my back deck in meditation, did a real deep one. Nothing happened. You kind of lose hope. And
Mhm.
you just, but I was like, yeah, whatever. What's the harm at this point? I was just doing it at the end of the day, every day before bed. So I went and laid down in bed and I just did one more reach out, while I'm laying in bed. And I guess I fell asleep doing that. At some point in the middle of the night, and I don't remember the time because the time was irrelevant to me regarding what happened because I woke up to a text message from an unknown number and it just said, "Are you ready to meet us?" And I thought I was dreaming at first or whatever, but at the same time it was real. I'm holding my phone reading this unknown text, but I knew, part of me knew that it was them. I don't know why. I just had this knowing. I didn't question like who is this or whatever. I said yes, of course. And they just replied back, "Come to your back door." And I slept in my basement at the time. I had a house in St. Louis, Missouri. I slept in the basement. My room was in the basement. I was living in the basement at the time, and the reason for that is because I had roommates. I bought this house, and I needed roommates to help pay for it, and I let them stay upstairs, and I built myself a room in the basement. I never moved back upstairs. So I was sleeping in the basement, and I get this text, and it says, "Come to your back door." And I get up and I had a walkout basement and I just walk out into the living area that's outside my bedroom and I go out and look into the yard. I open the door and I'm looking. I'm just sitting there in my boxers, and I'm looking in the yard. There's nothing there. And I'm looking up, like, is there a ship? There's nothing there. And then like reality sets in. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like, somebody's effing with me, obviously like they're not texting me, like reality kicks in and I'm sitting there looking around and like, man, it's like one of my friends is playing a prank on me. Like easily somebody's playing a prank on me. So I'm just looking around and there's nothing. And, I give one last look. I'm probably not looking that long, maybe a minute or two. And I'm like,
Mhm.
whatever. And I pull the door shut and I turn around to walk back into my bedroom or into my house, really. And there's this apparition. There's this white apparition there that's this turns out to be this tall blonde woman phasing in, like half phased into this reality. It scared the shit out of me. Not because she was scary, but when you're not expecting to see something in your house in the middle of the night, like I don't care who you are. If you turn around in the middle of the night and there's somebody standing there, you're gonna jump. I
That
don't
that
care if it's
amygdala is gonna fire.
Exactly. And it scared me, but then I had to process what I was seeing because it wasn't like a shadow being or whatever. It was a light. It was a light being, and she wasn't fully phased in. Like I would say, the top 3/4 of her body were phased in to the
Okay.
point where and she was transparent. I could see physical details, but I could also see through her. She was this light being and very tall, beautiful blonde hair in this white gown with this like blue undergarment thing. And she had this necklace on with this gold medallion that stood out, but I don't remember any of the details on the medallion. Part of me is frozen in fear, trying to process what's happening, but also I realize I actually can't move. I was in a mild state of paralysis. In hindsight, I think I understand what was happening. I think that in order for these higher dimensional beings to phase into our reality, they have to alter the density of the room so they can even be perceivable. So they can even make a suitable environment for them to even show up as even semi-transparent the way she was. So I think that's what was going on there. And by her altering the density of the room, it actually put me in like a mild state of paralysis. It wasn't a
Okay,
negative
so
feeling.
you felt
I
like
was
you
just like,
literally couldn't move your body?
yeah, I was like kind of just like frozen still. And I'm staring at her. I don't know what's going on. I'm in complete shock and awe. Like, this can't be happening. And I get a telepathic message from her. It's first of all like the most loving possible feeling ever. Like, it was beautiful and just angelic, actually. And she says telepathically in my head, with a whole download of emotions and visions that I would like unpack for days to come. She says, "Honey, you're not ready yet." And that's all she said. And then she just phased away. And I kind of like broke free. I'm looking. First thing I did was run back into my room to check my cell phone. When I came back into my room, I noticed that my dog she looked like she was sedated. And I actually, that was really strange. Maybe the strangest part of the whole thing, because my dog, anytime I would get up, she would get up. She was a puppy. And
Mhm.
if I definitely went to the back door and opened the door at night, she would be out. Like, she
Right.
was like, it didn't make any sense that she slept through that whole thing.
Yeah, no, that's wild.
Yeah, so she was sedated and will look like she was sedated. They didn't hurt her. Anyway, that's the first thing I noticed when I went back in my room, and then I started like processing that. And I grabbed my phone. I got a screenshot this text message. Like, I need proof of this. Like, people aren't going to believe me. And there's no text message. It was like gone off my phone. And I'm like, no, no, no. I'm like, is it in the deleted photos or in the deleted? I'm looking everywhere. Just like this has to be on my phone. Why isn't it on my phone? And there was nothing. And I was so bummed out about that because I wanted proof. Like, I wanted like people aren't going to believe me. For some reason, that was real important to me back then. Now
Right.
I appreciate the experience for the experience, but it was profound. It blew my mind. I laid down back in bed, and I don't think I fell asleep that night. In fact, I think I even took off work the next day because I just was so just blown away by what happened. And it wasn't until later that next evening I had got the message and I realized, what does she mean? Like, okay, you're not ready. And like, what, there's a whole download that came with it. And basically what I understood was that I had basically put my life on pause and I was doing all this spiritual stuff and changing my lifestyle and everything. I was taking it so seriously, and all I was doing was trying to communicate with this inner earth being. Like, I put every other project on hold. I wasn't doing anything. Like I didn't care about my job. I was in this escapism mentality. Like, I just wanted out of this reality and I want to talk to
Mhm.
one of these beings and I want to go with them or whatever.
Right.
And it dawned on me whenever she said that, like you came here to do a mission, and like communicating with us is only secondary to what you're here to do. You proved to yourself that you can do it. You proved we are here. We showed you we exist. And I can only imagine they were sitting there watching me like every night trying to communicate. And they're probably like, this poor guy, like, let's just show up so he stops
Throw the
and like,
dog a bone.
yeah, exactly. Like, just show up and tell them, like, yes, we're real, we're here, but you need to be focused on this mission. You are here to wake people up. You're here to do this big thing for humanity. And If I put all my focus into that, it just kind of it's a distraction.
Mhm.
So, and there's more. I kind of laid out all the stuff that came through in my book, what was in that download. But that night, I got the message, and the next night I went to bed and I laid there and I said, listen, I did the whole thing. I just extended out the line of communication. And I said, listen, I understand I got the message and I appreciate that. Thank you so much. It was a beautiful experience. I won't attempt to communicate with you anymore because I know now what I have to focus on. But I would love it if you could tell me your name and at least know who I was talking to. And this time it wasn't necessarily telepathic. Like it wasn't this feeling. It was like an audible voice.
Mhm.
Sounded like one of the elves from Lord of the Rings. Almost like I was wearing headphones, but they were inside my head or something.
Mhm.
And she said, Corse prefolse. And I thought I would never remember that. And I was like, I jumped up. I'm like, oh my God, did I just hear an actual name? Like this time there was no waiting. Like it was an immediate response.
Like,
And
how
I
long
was like,
after the initial, sighting, like, you saw her, and how long after that were you hearing her name?
literally the next night, as I was laying down for bed the
Okay, the
next
next
night.
night.
So I jumped up because I like wasn't even expecting to hear anything, to be honest.
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Oh my god, I need to write that down. Si corse prefolse. How do I spell that?" And I had on my nightstand, I'll never forget, I had a waxy piece of cardboard that my passport came in, and for some reason I had an orange colored pencil, like, I don't even know why it was there, but it was and I'm trying to write this name, Si corse prefolse, into this on this waxy cardboard with an orange colored pencil, but it's not writing because you know what I mean, like a pencil on a waxy cardboard surface. So I'm like indenting it into the cardboard, trying to spell Si corse prefolse, but I didn't. It turns out I didn't even need to do that because that name was basically tattooed on my brain from that point forward,
Mhm.
and I. I'll never forget it. It was so powerful. Si corse prefolse.
It's very
Literally,
interesting, it's very Latin sounding.
yeah, it was. But the way she said it was elven. It was like the elves from Lord of the Rings. Like that one woman, I don't even know her name. If you ever see the movie, the way they talk, it's like very
Like
majestic.
Galadriel.
Yeah, yeah. So that was it was amazing, and it was one of the craziest things at the time. There was a lot of other experiences I was going through, a lot of dark stuff, and this was one of the it was like a breath of fresh air in the sense that I finally had an experience that wasn't an attack and it was positive. And it showed me like, okay, there is a light force out there. There is a other side to this. Because I didn't really believe in much prior to my mother's passing away when I had started getting attacked. But those attacks showed me with beyond a shadow of a doubt that the dark side absolutely existed. And it was through that darkness that I discovered, well, if there's a light, if there's a dark side, there has to be stories about the positive angelic beings. That has to be true too. And it was
Mhm.
through the darkness that I ended up finding the light, but that was the one of the first really positive experiences. And I guess I'll follow up with this on this saying that when I started telling this story, one of the biggest issues that people have was that ETs will never text you. That doesn't happen. That's not how they communicate. Like that's you're getting tricked. It's the government. It's not blah blah blah. And no one like people had a real hard time with that part of it. And
I
I
didn't.
right, but a lot of people did. I was surprised in the comments, and,
Mhm.
but what I realized after looking into it, all the inner earth testimonies, they have their own they call it an amino acid-based internet system, and that sounds funny, but what it is basically it's like using the mycelium network of the planet to transfer data, and it's like this organic internet, and it's talked about in great detail if you read the Telos testimonies from under Mount Shasta. They literally talk about this internet that they have,
Okay,
and they
interesting.
and it
I haven't heard of those.
what's that?
I haven't heard of those. Oh, definitely.
Yeah, so I have one of the books I have, it kind of breaks down like this alleged internet system that they utilize, and they also can communicate with. It's nothing for them to get on our social media apps or tap into our cell towers. and communicate with beings on the surface. It's all part of the same. They can easily tap into our
I
internet.
mean, if this is a being that's phasing into your bedroom from God knows where, sending a text message to a probably very primitive device in their eyes is it's gotta be a cakewalk as well as erasing it, I would think.
Right. Yeah. So that's a great, exactly. And, but a lot of people, for some reason, they were hung up on that. And I get it, but that's what happened. And I mean, that's just simply what happened.
Mhm.
Yeah. It turns out that, if, I've heard other testimonies, like Corey Good, a lot of people have an issue with him now, but in the early days, he was talking about some of his inner earth encounters, and he was brought into this library, and he saw books that were literally ordered off of Amazon in
Mhm.
their inner earth library, and me, like, that's further evidence that they're just like utilizing our infrastructure
Even
too.
the inner earth beings have an Amazon subscription.
Right, like, he didn't say they were from Amazon, but they said they looked like they were just, like, shipped and ordered from, like, something like Amazon.
Okay,
Anyway,
right.
that yeah, and we don't have like, that's I don't know if that proves or disproves anything, but it's just an interesting tidbit of information. So, I think that in my opinion, like, this internet, that it makes perfect sense that they would actually have something, a communication data transfer system like something like our internet, but far more sophisticated, in my
Mhm.
opinion. So that doesn't, to me, that part's actually not hard to believe, but I just always like to follow that story up with emphasizing that for anyone that does have pause there.
Alright. S So I would like to go back a little bit and get some more of the sensory details of when you stepped outside from searching for the whoever messaged you,
Right.
and you turned around and came back in your side into your house, inside into your house, and you saw this white light. Can you describe that light a little bit more in, like, more detail?
Well, it wasn't, it was a apparition. It was a humanoid apparition, like something you would see in a ghost story or a sci-fi movie,
Okay, so,
like
like, it wasn't, like, radiating, it was, like, the imprint of the physical form was light.
yeah, it was like glowing. It was glowing. So imagine the Force ghost on Star Wars, like how Obi-Wan shows up after he dies. If anyone's seen that movie and that scene, it was very much like that, but radiating even more light. Like she was just like almost like a hologram. But it wasn't a hologram. It didn't feel like a hologram. Could have been. It felt like she was like physically like altering the density of the room and like halfway phased in. And the more you read about these testimonies, our our third density is very hard for them. It's hard for them to exist here. It's so dense. That's why they can't even surface yet, because we have literally devolved into such a dense reality, which is what forced them underground in the first place. And even it's explained that even like a negative thought towards one of these higher dimensional beings would actually hurt their energy body. Like if you just looked at one of them and had a derogatory or a judgmental thought, it would physically hurt them. It would be painful to them. So there's no benefit to them whatsoever to surface
Mm.
at this point. Um, that's why it's up to us if we want to communicate with them, we could set that intention. But it was just like she was just an apparition, a light body, basically, with physical details still. Just like if you imagine the Force Ghost in
Can you,
Star Wars.
describe her, like, physical details more? Like, what you remember of, like, her face? Does it
Yeah,
still trigger?
absolutely, absolutely beautiful, like perfect Nordic ET, just like you see, like flawless, long blonde hair. I don't know what color her eyes were. I'm only assuming they were blue,
Mm,
but I don't really remember that detail.
okay.
Long blonde hair with this white gown that were like went all the way down. Like I said, I couldn't see her feet, but it was
Mhm.
this gown, like a robe, basically, like a robe that was kind of crossed, and
Okay.
like underneath of it, there was like this blue, like electric blue color, like undergarment, and then there was this golden, well, a prominent like golden medallion.
Okay.
Something was on it. The symbol I don't remember. couldn't see it. I wasn't paying attention to it, I guess. It just that part didn't stand out, but I remember seeing she was wearing something around her neck. And, yeah, her hair was almost like it was, like wasn't necessarily blonde like we could imagine it. It was more like a blondish white. It was a different kinda off tone than we would see here on the surface, but it was
Right.
blonde is the best way to describe it.
Okay, so yeah, so blonde, white, like, very, like, inhuman sorta color.
Yeah, yeah, it was strange and pale. She was very pale, like white. Well, I mean, maybe it's because I was just seeing like a light being, so I couldn't
Right.
see a real skin tone color, but it wasn't like a dark-skinned being whatsoever, like Nordic.
Mhm. Okay. And then what about the, like, physical sensations that you were getting, like, in your body? So, like, aside from, the paralysis, you weren't able to move. Were you feeling anything else physically?
Yeah, and then emotional. It was so whenever she's just connected with me, it was like she bonded, we like mind meld or whatever you wanna call it. I was I got the message, "Honey, you're not ready yet," but it was like a flood of emotions and images, and it was just, like, overwhelmingly, like, so much information in an instant, like, you don't even know we don't we don't understand what that's like here on the surface. I
Mhm.
know other people who've communicated with extraterrestrials and other inner Earth beings, they explain this telepathy, I guess, for lack of a better term, and how it feels, and it's these emotions and these pictures, and it's like images,
Mhm.
it's almost not even words, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, you're kinda like where they're pouring so much information into your mind, and then your mind is trying to assemble words out of it to, like, explain it to your intellectual
Yes.
self.
Yeah, yeah, precisely. So, it was everything about it was overstimulating. I was mildly paralyzed, I was getting this flood of emotions, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I didn't like, you don't even it takes a minute to see whenever you see something, you almost wanna gaslight yourself and tell yourself that you're not
Mhm.
seeing it, right? I didn't even have the time to do that. Like, next thing I know, I'm in this experience. Years later, in March of 2022, I had a TR-3B, a black triangle, fly over my house. I was guided to just get up. I was gonna sit down and watch a movie. I'm like, no, it's the first nice, warm night of the year. I'm just gonna look at the stars. Walk outside off my couch, lay down on the deck, look up, and you I saw a black triangle craft with the three lights on each corner, like a TR-3B, completely silent, just flying over my house, and then it turned, it banked, and then it just went off and eventually just kind of banked away. The reason I'm bringing this up is because it was so real. It was like seeing an airplane. Like it was just as ordinary as seeing an airplane. Like we hear about these UFO sightings where there's this light in the sky or this thing, whatever. It was a craft, but it was completely silent. It was so real that I was actually in a disbelief. Like I thought to myself, I can't be seeing this right now. This is I just can't this can't be real.
Mhm.
You're in disbelief when something like that happens because it's so out of your paradigm that the ordinary person is going to want to try to write it off as something else first. So all of this stuff goes through your mind until it dawns on you. You literally blink, you look away, whatever, and it's still there. So it was that very similar with the inner earth with her. Like I didn't believe that, part of me never thought anything was going to ever come of these meditations, right? Especially not in that capacity. I'm just thinking I'm going to have like this maybe telepathic line of communication or whatever, but not actually get to see like a physical apparition. And so that was, I was just overwhelmingly flooded with emotions and you really don't know what to think
Struck.
and yeah, just yeah, overstimulated.
And then aside from that, are there any, details that you feel we haven't covered about the experience itself?
Let me think about that. I don't know if there's any aspect of that story I'm forgetting, but not necessarily. I think that was it. Did like a year or two later, I had another line of communication with her that I wasn't expecting. And this sent me down a whole other rabbit hole or opened my mind to a new possibility. But I was basically just kind of waking up out of a deep sleep. And as I was waking up, it was like I was overhearing my higher self having a conversation with somebody. Like it was weird. I was like overhearing myself having a conversation with somebody, and that voice was Sikorse. It was her. It was that voice. I'll never forget it. And I don't even remember. I can't even remember what was being said because I was just out of the sleep. I was waking up, and I'm like, what am I hearing? And then in my head, I said Sikorse, and she said yes. And I like saw her face, and then like she faded away, and I'm like waking up. I'm like, no, come back, whatever. Like, so what I realize is that there's a highly likely chance that I've been in communication with them in a much larger capacity than I'm aware of through a higher heightened state of consciousness, an elevated state of consciousness, or my higher self, or whatever it is, while I'm sleeping and in the
Mhm.
astral realm, whatever that looks like, because it's almost like I woke up and overheard something that I wasn't supposed to hear. So a version of me, I think, is in constant communication with them, or maybe not constant, but regular communication with them. And, down here on the surface, we don't have recall of that. And I was explaining this to somebody, and they told me, they said it's not actually that hard to remember what you're doing in the dream state, in the astral realm. It's not like the memory disappeared forever, but you can't remember it because when you wake up, you're literally existing on a different bandwidth than where
Mhm.
that experience occurred. And if you want to remember what's going on at night or what's happening in the astral realm in your dreams, you have to find that frequency. You have to somehow tap into what frequency it is that all this stuff is occurring, and then try to reach that frequency in a state of meditation. And if you can do that and reconnect and reemerge with that frequency, then you'll get the download, you'll get the memory back of what happened. So just something interesting for anyone out there who's trying to remember their dreams or whatever it is, when you wake up, you're on a different station.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you just have
And
to find a way in your waking life to tune back into the other station that you're existing in whenever you're sleeping. So, we're talking frequencies here. And same rings true for how she had to literally alter the density of the room and potentially raise the frequency in the room so she could even appear in as much as she did. And in order for her to manifest fully physical, I don't think my physical body would have been able to handle that frequency. So
Mhm.
there was like a meet in the middle type of thing. So I quit eating meat. I was really focusing on my spiritual practices and stuff, and really trying to raise my vibration. And I got to a point where, okay, they can meet me in the middle. And I think that's what happened. I had to prove to them and myself that I was serious about it, that I wanted to do it, and that I could do it. And then by doing so, I created a frequency around myself that allowed them to meet me in the middle. That's the
They were
way
like,
I
"All right,
perceive.
send somebody out there to go meet this guy. He's not gonna stop."
But I think it wouldn't have happened if I wasn't preparing myself.
Mhm.
And I've heard the same thing with there's a book out there that's not even published. It's called the Lost City of Manoa or something like that. One of the most incredible stories I've ever read. I have the PDF. A friend of mine knows the guy who wrote the book, and it's about him basically finding this portal to an Atlantean outpost, a pocket reality down in Colombia, South America.
I think I met that guy.
Yeah, I don't. It might be a different guy because, as far as I know, this other guy it's a friend of a friend, and he's never gone public with it, and that's why
Okay.
that's why the book never got published. Well, if it's a real portal, a real place, then other people will, and according to his story, other people do access this other world.
Mhm.
But anyway, it took him 7 years to prepare. He had to change everything about the way he lived his life.
Mm.
And he was meeting this woman who was basically like coming out of this city. It's basically like if you ever seen Black Panther, Wakanda, like
Mhm.
that's the way it is. It's like the mountain range that you're looking at is an illusion. And there's this like golden city, this amazing Atlantean outpost that is actually existing there, but they have this basically cloaked system. It's like a pocket reality. So you think you're looking at a mountain, but whenever you access it, you walk through this mountain and it's a whole other world. Anyway, he eventually gained access to that place, but he had to literally same thing, stop eating meat. He had to do this and that, and this woman was meeting him that he found out later once he entered the city was actually from that was an Atlantean being from that city, but she was coming out and meeting him halfway, and he just thought that it was like this woman from the tribe or the local town, like she
Hmm.
was a physical person, right? And he was spending time with her, and she was like giving him all this advice and things, and she was basically helping him prepare himself. It's not like you can just go stumble into this city with a camera and prove to the world that it's real. Like it was a true spiritual journey for this guy. And it took him quite literally 7 years before he was able to access this place. And he wrote a book about it and it's profound. Just going back to my point, like there's a lot to this. Like it's not like you're going to go to these inner earth entrance locations and find a physical entrance most of the time. That's just simply not the case. And that's why a lot of skeptics who've gone to locations that people have claimed to be brought into inner earth and they just see a rock wall and there's nothing there. And the skeptics are like, yeah, these people are nuts. Well, if you don't believe in it and you're not putting it in the work and you're just going there to prove it with a camera, you're absolutely not going to get invited in. Like you can't go and just knock on their door and be like, hey, I'm here. Like it's a whole spiritual process.
Hmm.
And then you have to be invited. You have to be invited into their world, or it's all circumstantial, I'm sure, for each person. But, I think in some cases, maybe people stumble into situations because of whatever the circumstances are. But for the most part, I think that it's a whole thing. It's just journey you go on. We came to this third density, this physical reality to experience it, not to escape it. But people here are practicing enlightenment and they can do things to achieve amazing things that aren't supposed to exist, like witnessing and entering an inner earth portal to an Atlantean outpost or whatever it is. And I just think, I don't know why I'm just kind of rambling now, but if you had any other further questions.
But no, I mean, I mean, there's so much out there. That's why I started this podcast. There's so many different wild experiences that are out there, and I want to try to document them all. Like these experiences, I've had a lot of them myself, and there's been a number of things you've mentioned that I've been like, oh man, I want to mention this. But I know that so many other people have had wild experiences, and pretty much every experience people have told me, like just like it ingrains itself in my memory so deeply. That's why, I contacted you to tell me on this podcast about the experience you told me about, what, 7 years ago now? Like 7, 8 years
Has it
ago?
been that long? Yeah. Wow.
And like
Yeah.
that's something that I, very vividly recall because it fascinates me to no end to hear about everyone's experiences. And I think that these experiences really do constantly point people towards some sort of greater reality, something far beyond what we're being fed by the mainstream. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not as simple as everything that we can see within this small little band of visible light. It's just not. Like, and
Yeah.
people's experiences do matter. And a lot of them have crazy amounts of overlap for, potentially crazy people.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I've had a few other separate inner earth experiences since then. One while I was in Belize, I had a really profound experience, and another one in Mount Shasta just last summer, actually.
So now that they've heard your experience, let's tell the viewers a little bit about who Tyler is.
Yeah, so I'm an ordinary guy. I grew up in the Midwest, St. Louis, Missouri, and my life was just as normal as anyone else's well, at least I thought it was. When you get older, you look back in your childhood and realize, things were a little more significant than you thought. But as far as I was concerned at the time, I was living a normal life. It's kind of born into this religious family. My mom's parents were separated basically as I was born. Um, so I side was very Christian, my dad's side was very Catholic, and I was just born into this religious family, right? Going to church, I went to Bible school, all this stuff, but I actually always resisted it. I didn't like being told what I had to do. Church was boring to me, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So as soon as I was old enough, and I could decide for myself, I didn't want to go to church anymore. I have to go. Oh, I have to go. I don't want to go. That's the way my mentality was. I was always that like rebellious gene. It's not that I didn't believe in it or whatever. I just didn't like doing things that I had to do. And
Mhm.
I think that's part of why I'm even doing what I'm doing now. It's like this system breaker archetype, right? So anyway, I kind of just broke free from that, and I ended up developing a belief in nothing. And I didn't even know what an atheist was or anything, but looking back on it, that's probably what I would have been. I just believed in science, evolution, we're here by chance, whatever. But at the same time, I was kidding myself because I always was fascinated by ETs and Bigfoot and all this stuff, but it just remained this interest. It wasn't until my mother passed away when I was 25, 24 actually, that I started getting attacked. And I kind of mentioned this earlier that it forced me to start believing in this stuff that I kind of ignored and suppressed, and I made fun of and ridiculed all this stuff. Well, now it was happening to me, and I didn't have the luxury of disbelief anymore because it was real. It was keeping me awake at night. I was 25 years old. I was afraid of the dark. I was afraid to turn my lights out. I was missing work. I was being levitated out of my bed. I was having these demons on top of me. What I would consider, looking back, potential alien abductions. All these things were happening, and that was in 2011. It started in 2011, and for years I kind of suffered in silence. I was afraid to say anything to anybody because I knew people would think I was crazy, right? And I eventually confided in my dad, told him what was happening to me, and he proceeded to tell me that he had an experience when he was a kid. He remembered being taken on a craft and fed this goop and all this stuff, and turns out his mom was an experiencer too, and it's like it's in the family.
I didn't actually know that.
Yeah, so there's a whole story there, and then there's like a military aspect, like my
I'm gonna
my
have to get Jim
grandfather, my
on.
yeah, yeah, you should.
I'll contact him.
But there's a military aspect to it too. I kind of grew up on this military base in Missouri, and my grandfather, it was a base that my grandfather was stationed at for a little bit, and it's just like this weird connection that eventually led to some recruitment attempts into some shadow programs, which is all documented in my book, and secret space program type stuff. That was rewinding back to, I opened up to my dad and like he believed me and it was amazing. But it was through all of these experiences that I ended up finding I ended up finding purpose in life. I believed in now God and Jesus and all these things that I was trying to suppress and hide from and run from. It was all things were happening in my life to where, like I said earlier, if the dark exists, the light has to exist. And now it's become it's a difficult path. It's a difficult path to find God outside of the church.
Mhm.
And that's actually, ironically, side note, the entire Rocky movies are actually, if you listen to Stallone, he was recently interviewed. He said it's a Christian story in the sense that if you really look at the movies through this lens, it's about a man who finds God without going to church. He finds it through the hardships of life,
Mhm.
and so he never took the traditional route, and that's kind of I relate with that. I
Right.
relate with that. And I think it actually, in a way, it's actually better. And I'm grateful, not better, but in a way, I'm really grateful for that because I always rejected the indoctrination of like the main story that I was told to believe this is the truth and don't think outside of this. This is what happened. I rejected that and I found it on my own. And I found that it's so much bigger than what they were trying to teach me in church. So I think that was interesting. But eventually I, started just going through all this stuff and I was like, I need I need people in my life to to communicate with. I need there's got to be other people out there. And I stumble across this stuff starts showing up in your algorithm and these synchronicities happen and whatever. I ended up at my first conference where I met you actually.
Yep.
And that's where all this started. That's where I met my co-host Aaron, and we. It wasn't long after that where we realized we were both from the same town, same hometown, St. Louis, and it was a weird way. We had to meet in Colorado to realize that we both lived in the same town. But he had moved away and was living somewhere else at the time. Anyway, we started the podcast very shortly after that. But I knew when I went to that conference, it was the most life-changing thing. I didn't know all these people out there existed and other people believe in this stuff too. I didn't know a single person. I didn't have an online presence. I went with my dad because I didn't know who else to go with. I was going to go alone, and I asked him, and he said he wanted to go. And it changed both of our lives, and neither of us wanted to go back home. We were just, it was like heaven on earth. It was like we found our tribe. And I knew in that moment that this is what I want to do. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know if I wanted to be, I didn't know what it meant. I just wanted to be involved in
Right.
this world. This is what I want to do. And my dad even made a comment at that conference. He says, I could see you. He goes, I got a weird vision. I could like see you on stage one day talking. And back then it was so out of reach. It never occurred to
Right.
me that I would be doing what I'm doing. But, I actually cried when I went back home when I had to leave because I had met you and so many people that, are lifelong friends now. And it was like I really, really didn't want to go back to the matrix of my 40-hour job in construction and the soul-sucking lifestyle. And I almost overnight no longer resonated with all of my friends, friends in quotes, because I realized that if you remove like partying and alcohol and drugs from the equation, like most of my friends, we didn't have anything else in common,
Right.
And a few of them stuck around for a long time, but very small few. Some of them were real connections, but most of them were just surface level. And they all wanted to hang out when I got back, and I wasn't. They knew something changed in me. I knew something changed in me. They thought I was going off the deep end. I found out through one of my friends that they were actually trying to arrange an intervention, um, because I had just suddenly I wasn't the Tyler that they knew anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't like that. They're trying to tell me that I was crazy for believing in all this stuff. It was hard. It was hard. It was hard. I lost a lot of friendships. I even had some real tough family relationships. Everything's kind of healed now, and everybody's happy now. But it was a tough time, and that's the awakening for all of us. I don't have to go into all that, but the podcast saved my life in the sense that I every week I was reminded that I'm not crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That all these other people are having these experiences. This world is not what I was led to believe, far beyond anything that I even thought was possible. Everything exists. It's all true. I mean, it's just like it was amazing. Like I know like people reach out to us and thank us because it helped them awaken and they said what we're doing is very, helped them heal or helped them unite their family. We've had some very beautiful comments, even in some cases, like one person said that they were literally about to commit suicide and they stumbled across one of our episodes and listened to it and it changed their life. And like they said that it saved their life. So we know that what we're doing is important. It's having an impact. But at the same time, it was just as important for me, and I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
Aaron too. Like it was just as therapeutic and healing for us. Like we needed it too. And it was a weekly reminder about all this stuff. Because what happens out there in the real world is you could have the most mind-blowing podcast episode ever that'll literally shift somebody's paradigm and blow them, just wide open. But what happens is they'll listen to that episode and then they get distracted by life. They have to take their kids to soccer. They have to go to work. They have to cook dinner. What do we like this weekend schedule? We have these people. Life happens. And then next thing you know, they forgot about that life altering podcast that they just listened to. And everything in it resonated with them, but they didn't have time to put it into practice. They didn't have time to take it seriously because they got sucked right back into life. What doing this every week did for me was I didn't have the opportunity to get sucked back into life because I had to do it again next week and the next
Right.
week and the next week and the next week. So it was a constant reminder to myself. A lot of times we were talking about stuff and all these spiritual things and all this amazing stuff and all these healing modalities and Reiki and you name it, just go down the list. And I understood them inside and out. But at some point along the line, I realized I wasn't practicing them. But I had to have that constant reminder every week to help me realize that I wasn't practicing them. So that at some point you have to shift your focus. I'm like, okay, I understand all this stuff. Just because I talk about it every week doesn't mean I'm embodying that. So you have to start really changing the way you live your life. And if you don't change with the frequencies, because your ascension is moving into these higher frequencies, if you don't change who you are, things happen in life that make it very difficult for you because now you're not in this flow state. You're not in harmony with in alignment with what your mission is. So you're resisting and actually creating difficult scenarios in your life. So I had to really practice what I was preaching. And it just took one day realizing that, I talk about qigong all the time and Reiki and healing and meditating, but am I doing any of it? Maybe here and there, but I wasn't like embodying it.
Right. A consistent practice.
Yeah. So, and also like going back to what I said earlier, like I was taking spirituality so seriously at the beginning, which was to my own detriment. I eventually realized, yeah, like I encountered that inner earth being and stuff and all this stuff. It was amazing in that sense, but I was taking it so seriously that it dawned on me one day that I don't even remember the last time I laughed. I had fun. I was like, "Oh my god." I learned about everything. I realized the state of the world, and I felt like I had a job to do, and this is serious. But I stopped having fun and enjoying life. And I was like I felt like I was almost shamed into some of the spiritual practices, which I realized like it can easily become another religion. And
Hmm.
some people do turn it into another religion. And you don't have to there's no right or wrong way to approach spirituality. Like it's different for everyone. But I thought that I had to sit in the lotus position and meditate and I couldn't eat meat and I had to do this. And I can't even go hang out with my friends anymore because they're in the matrix and I'm not whatever, it was just
Right.
this whole stupid mindset. And I realized at one point I was miserable. I was like, I quit. I don't even remember the last time I went out and laughed with some friends. I was so isolated because I thought I was here to do this thing. It was actually, I broke out of it in the weirdest way. It was kind of, you could say it was a relapse, but it was the best relapse of my life because I had quit drinking too. And I realized like I didn't even know how to have fun without alcohol. So that was a whole lesson for me. But I was just like, I was going nuts one night and I was like, why am I being so hard on myself? Just go have a beer, Tyler. Like it's not the end of the world. So I went and bought a 6-pack and I built a fire in my backyard and I sat by the fire and drank a 6-pack of beer. And I felt like I was free. Like I felt like I had to put myself in this box of spirituality where everything was so perfect and you can't do this and you can't do that. Otherwise you're not spiritual.
Hmm.
And I just sat there and I drank a 6-pack of beer and stared at the fire. And I got a text from my friend, and he said, "Hey," the friend that I quit hanging out with because I was too good for him now. This is you have to have an ego death and all this too. And he said, "Hey, we're having a big pool party at my house for my dad's birthday tomorrow. Whatever, the family would love to see you." And ordinarily I would have said no, but I was a little buzzed. I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna go to this party. I went the next day to this party and I just shifted back into the old version of myself. And I was so relieved that I let my guard down and I was just being me again. They played this game in the pool called Butt in the Hole. They had this raft and you had to jump into the pool and try and land your butt in the tube. Stupidest thing ever, but I was found my inner child again. We were having some drinks and we were all playing this dumb game. Playing in the pool, swimming. I was laughing. I was having the best time of my life, and I realized in that moment that Like, we can't forget to be happy. Like, you can't like, don't take this stuff too seriously. This spiritual work, not even life, you know? Because if you're not experiencing the joy in life, you're not actually living. And in fact, you're gonna do yourself a disservice. So I had to learn that the hard way, and then from that point forward, there's a balance. You can't always live in that like, you can't just use alcohol to bury your problems. But in that point, in that particular case, it helped me realize that I need to find balance. There needs to be a balance between both worlds. You can't just
Right.
lean one way and then expect your life to be perfect because there's no such thing.
100%, man. And then now I think if you're down, we'll move into the how and why. And